if you have, well, it won't help you that much for today's class.
I saw this is lesson 11 is on YouTube now also.
Not for this class, because today is lesson 11.
Oh.
There are 2 other playlists where I'm doing ASP.NET, the Monday and Wednesday, so either of those sections of Comp 2007, that class is similar. They're a week or 2 ahead of us. So you can look at lesson 9. However, for today's class, their lesson, we used the full ASP.NET identity package because we did it a few weeks ago. So the lesson for this week is a bit different. So let's grab that script and save it. Just save it anywhere to your machine. Just save it to my documents. Just go right over here. So you'll need to connect to your database. You can do it right through Visual Studio if you want. You just go to Server Explorer and expand your connection. If I right-click on it, I have an option here that says New Query. Or you can do this through Management Studio in the same way. So if you're doing it through Management Studio, just connect to your database through the login screen. You probably have your login saved already. I think everybody's configured now with SQL Server. So then you expand your databases and expand your COMP2084 database. And if I just select it, I can click New Query here. And now I can just click on the open file icon and browse to that SQL file. Or you can use the File Open menu. So find your lesson 11 instructors.sql. Yeah, we're not, yeah, so we'll pop, the reason is because we want to hash the passwords. If you notice the fields, so we have an instructor ID which will get auto-generated, first name and last name, username, password. We also have a salt field. Does anybody know, some of you probably heard of that term before, what is salting?
Something used to curate.
Yes?
Used as a dynamically generated key for generating hashes.
That's right. So not only are we going to hash the password, but instead of simply hashing it, we also generate a random, basically a random string, and that gets included along with the password hash. So that way, if 3 different users all provide the same password, the salt value generates some additional random string to go with it. So the hashed values don't look all the same. They're actually going to be unique. Okay? So in order to verify when somebody logs in, we're going to need to know what the salt value used was, because that's going to be generated randomly when they register. So we need to store that value when they log in, because if we run it another time, that value will be different every time. So we want to store the salt value along with the password. So we're not going to insert any records here. We want to insert records through our C# application because we want to salt and hash the password before we save them. If I just wrote an insert script, we wouldn't have a salt and hash value for password. Okay, so we're just going to build an empty table. So all we need to do here is execute. If your database is not called COMP2084, you can then just change the name here, or you can even take out the first line if your database name is different from mine. So I'm just going to click execute.
Wait, did you?
Nope. If I had run it already, it would have said the table already exists. So now if I go in and refresh my list of tables,
Because you highlighted it?
oh, yeah,
That's what I was.
I had the first line highlighted. Oh, no, it did run. Okay.
When I try and create a new query, it says that I have an incompatible SQL server.
Then try it through Visual Studio, doing it through Visual Studio. Or you're doing it through Visual Studio, then try it through Management Studio. Okay, didn't like that, did it? Okay, I'm going to try this without the foreign key for now, and we can make the foreign key through our diagram. We'll try it this way. So I'm just going to highlight everything above. There, sorry. The script does work. Should work for you. Yeah. So now you've got an instructor table. And we've got a foreign key relationship. So every instructor requires a department ID. So we have a one-to-many relationship.
So what did you just do?
I already had a table in there for mine yesterday. Yours should just work. I had to delete my old table. It was crashing because I already had a primary key constraint called instructors, PK instructors. Just click refresh. It doesn't refresh this list automatically. There's a refresh button right here.
Yeah, but when I try to click on it, it's for students or anything like that. It's not popping up. Oh, never mind.
Okay, so now we've got an empty table. So the step 2, in order for our C# application to access this table, we want to update our model, because our model in our EDMX file, it includes courses, departments, enrollments, and students, but it doesn't have instructors. So I'm going to show you how, if we change the database, we put a new table in, how we can now include that table without having to undo what we've already done. So in my Solution Explorer, I'm going to go to Models. And I'm going to open my EDMX file. So this was our database model, a contoso.edmx. So I'm going to double click that, and it gives us the diagram that looks like an ERD. So we built this out a few weeks ago. So what we need to do is we need to get the instructor table brought into our model, so then we'll get a class and then we can access that model through the entity framework. So anywhere in the white space, if I just right click, actually I'm going to do it over here, maybe I'll do it over here, doesn't matter. If I choose update model from database, this will allow us to push changes from the database to our ASP.NET application. So I'm going to choose update model. Now notice there's an add, a refresh, and a delete tab. So let's say we've changed something. Had we changed one of our existing tables and we wanted that change to get updated, if we went into the refresh, then we could refresh one or more of these tables. These tables are fine. We didn't make changes here. So I'm just going to go back to the Add tab and expand DBO, and I'm going to select my instructors table. I want to add that table, which it found in the database, into our model. And then I can just click Finish. So our other 4 tables will just stay there. And now we can see we've got an unsaved change here. And here's our instructor table with our relationship. One department, many instructors, one instructor in one department. So now I just want to save my updated model and build my solution. And that will generate an instructor.cs class along with the existing CS classes we have for each of the other tables.
Sorry, what did you go to get the instructor table?
I right-clicked and I chose Update Model from Database. And then in the Add tab, I expanded the tables and selected the instructor table.
It's asking me to choose exactly.
Yep, all of that.
Yeah, so follow it. There's a data connection already there. It's called default connection, so just choose that. No, you should already have a connection string. You don't need to recreate a connection string in web.config. You can say no to that option. You already have a connection string in web.config.
Doesn't matter if I choose yes.
Well, it's going to generate another connection string in your web.config file. We don't need it. So when we did this, when we created the model, by saying yes, it created this connection string. We don't need another one. So if you said yes, it's not going to affect, it's not going to break anything, but you could go into web.config and delete the second one. You don't need two connection strings. You only need the one we already built.
So I'm saying no to exclude sensitive data and then no, like not clicking save to the connection settings.
Yeah, you don't need to save it. We already have the connection. So if I expand underneath here now, we now also have an instructor model. So we had these other ones back from a few weeks ago, and now the instructor's been added in. So now we can access the instructor model with Entity Framework for doing create, read, update, delete. So anytime we make changes in the database, if we want those changes reflected in our application, whether we're adding tables or changing tables, we're using this option because we're doing database first. We make our changes in the database first, and then we update our model from our database. We either add items, remove items, or change items in our model so that our model's current.
How do we expand my tables and I can update my database?
So you just need to run the script in that database. Don't worry, I paused the recording so that discussion won't show up on YouTube. Okay, so our next thing we need to do is we want to build an instructor page. We want to build an instructor page where we'll have text boxes for first name, last name, username. We'll have 2 password boxes, and we'll have a save button. Okay, the salt we just generate in code. We also will need a drop-down list for the department ID. Anytime we add an instructor, we have to assign that instructor to a department.
It's just a form, not a grid view.
It's just going to be an input form. We're not going to build a list of instructors in Grid. We're just going to do it as a sign-up page. Okay, so to my project, I'm going to right-click. Let's add a web form with a master page, which probably is in this menu. If not, just go through Add New Item and choose Web Form with Master Page. And I'm just going to call this, maybe I'll call it Register. Actually, I'll call it more descriptive, Register Instructor.aspx. You can call yours whatever you like. And we'll use our master page as the template. So we're just going to build a form. So we're going to need 5 text boxes. The last 2 we'll need the attribute text mode equals password, because we'll have a password and a confirm. and we need a drop-down list. So just be consistent with how I did it on my student page. I used field set tags, so we'll do the same. So I'll create 4 more text boxes just like this one. The only difference in the password and confirm is we'll also add the attribute text mode equals password. So the characters are hidden as the user types. So I'll just... And we probably also are going to want a compare validator to make sure that we don't get 2 different password values. So I'll put on one of these. After my confirm box, so we're going to make sure that our password and our confirm values are equal, and if they're not, we'll show a message that says passwords must match. We've done this before. Oops, not a field set. So we'll put a drop-down list down at the bottom. We'll set the data text field as name, so the department names show in the list. And we'll set the data value field as the department ID. So show the name, but store the ID. And down at the bottom, I'll put a register button. So I think by now building the forms and the validators and in seeing people come to office hours and seeing where your assignments are and your labs, most of you have the mechanics down of building a form with validators. And lastly, we'll just want to add an on-click to our button. I'm just going to jump in here for a minute. So I can double click my button and get my register click method. Oops, sorry. Go back, where was I? There we go. So there's the bottom part of the form. Let's see if I got any of those code prompts to come back. Yeah, that actually worked. You missed that, didn't you?
No.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So delete the SUO file in the project directory. Compile the solution, close and reopen Visual Studio. That seemed to work. So your form should look like this. And we'll need to add some code on page load to fill our drop-down list. We've already done that in our courses page, right? When we add a new course, we do the same. We're filling our department drop-down, so we'll want this same little query to run and fill our drop-down here. Does anybody still need the HTML here?
Yes. Yeah, just the button.
It might be hidden if you're on a Mac, you may not see it.
So it's just in the directory.
It's where the SLN file is in the original folder of your project. Okay, so what you're going to need to do in your C#, you can start writing the function. You need a get departments function in your C# that uses Entity Framework to query the department model. And then we need to bind the department list to our DDL department. And this should only happen if postback is false. only the first time the form loads. So you can look at the code on your course page or course details page. What did we call it? We called it course details. We basically want the same function. Okay. We need to start to move along here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to create a get departments function. Our page is going to need our database to use our database, so we'll have to reference our entity framework model with using and the name of our project dot models. Right? Any page that's using the database has got to reference our models because that has our connection in all of our classes in the model. So we'll connect the same way we've been doing. We'll use our default connection. So we'll order our departments alphabetically by name. And then we'll just take that query result, we'll convert it to a list, and we'll bind it to our dropdown. So this is exactly the same code. If you have your course detail page open, you'll see this pretty much exact same code. So populate dropdown. So we'll set the data source property to our query result.toList. And we'll call data bind. If I go to course details, basically the exact, I used a different variable name here. We're doing the same thing. And then we wanted to put in a default option that says select. So we did this on the other page, we can do it here as well. We'll make a new list item. So we'll make the text say select and we'll give it a value of 0. Whoops, and that has to be they're both considered strings. So I need quotes around both of those. So create a new option and add it, whoops. I said add, it should be dot insert. We want that to go at position 0. Otherwise it will get added, but it'll get added to the end of our list. We want that option to be the first one in the drop-down. So this code, I may have changed the names of a couple of things. It's the same thing we'd already did on our course details. Now, if I compile and run my page right now, what's going to show in my drop-down list? Why will there be nothing in the drop-down list? Right, because we've written the function, but it never actually gets triggered. So where should we call it? Okay. So we'll call it in page load. Matt, I'm going to ask you this question because we had this conversation yesterday. Do we call it in page load every time?
No, it has to be in an if statement. Is not callback.
You got it. Why do we only want this to run if postback is false? So if not is postback. Right, because we only want to fill the department drop down the first time. If we fill it every time, what's going to happen is the user's going to pick a department, but then before we save them, our list gets repopulated, and their department value will get set to 0 again. So we only want this to run the first time the page loads. We don't need to populate the list repeatedly. It's sticky, so it will stay populated. So populate departments on first load of the page only. So now if we refresh the page, our departments should show up, and if we click the register button, we won't lose what department got selected. So now we've got our drop-down populating in alphabetical order. It's almost time for us to take a break. What I would like to do before we do take a break is I want to write most of the code on the register button, the stuff we already know how to do. I'm going to leave the password stuff out. So let's set up most of the code for populating all of the other fields, first name, last name, username. Then we'll take a break and we'll deal with the password, salting and hashing when we come back. So when the user clicks register, we're going to connect to the database. We're not going to worry about editing instructors. We're only doing adds here.
Where do you like end your connection up top? Is it like where the curly braces?
Yes, using means that this variable only exists within here. As soon as that's done, it destroys it. So that disconnects.
That's like our disconnect.
It's like a connection equals null in PHP.
We're saying connect, do this, and then we're gonna.
Right, so release that object from memory. So we will create an instructor object, an instructor variable. Just call it obj_I equals new instructor. Fill the properties from the form inputs. So we'll fill all the properties except the password for now. Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So we're going to save first name, last name, username, department ID. The department ID needs to be an integer, so we'll need to convert that. So all this code would work Then we'll add our instructor object to our collection and call save changes. So this will do a basic insert. Similar to what we've already done, there's nothing new here. We can't run this yet because our database is set up to not allow a null salt value or password. So if we run this and click register, we'd get errors saying password and salt value cannot be null in the database. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a pause here, and when we come back, we're going to add the salting of the password and the salting and hashing of the password, and then we're going to include those values in here as well. So we're going to need to use a cryptography library that comes part of the .NET framework. We'll have to include that library, and then I've given you some functions we can use for salting and hashing. We won't type those out, they're fairly lengthy and standard. So those are on Blackboard and we'll get to those.
Can you just scroll up a little bit?
So I could fill this out and run it, but I will get an error because those fields are empty. So we get validation errors because password and salt value are required.